Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this sanctuary, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax. My name's Norm Horofker. I'm the minister of this congregation. Proud to be so, and I welcome you all. Jessica Friesen is our music director, and we're all thrilled to have her back in Halifax following her visit with family in Morden, Manitoba. Unfortunately, her flight was delayed, and she arrived very late last night, so as a result, she's not with us in the sanctuary this morning, and we've resorted to some recorded music. Marie-Claude Leroux is our Director of Religious Exploration. She'll be participating from home this morning. And Margaret Galbraith is our Service Assistant, again working from home this morning. And this morning, John Piccolo is our Volunteer Technical Director. It's a great team, and thank you all for making this all work. If you're not already receiving notifications from our church and you would like to receive updates on our activities and services, please send an email to me, minister@uuch.ca, and we'll get you on our listserv so that you'll get a couple of announcements every week, official announcements from the church. In a minute, John will play a pre-recorded prelude. I chose a recorded prelude primarily in the event that Jessica's flight from Manitoba was delayed. The title of the music is Draw the Circle Wide. It happens to be the theme for our services next month in February. I was delighted to find out that the video was recorded at the Eastminster United Church in Toronto. I love the music, and again, delighted to learn that it was, the words were written by Gordon Light, a Canadian, I believe an Anglican minister, maybe even a bishop now. And music is by Mark Miller, an American. I hope you enjoy this and that you might learn to sing this song together next month with Jessica's help.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide.
No one stands alone, we'll stand side by side. Draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side.
I hope you enjoyed that and found it inspirational, or at least aspirational. I wish it was that easy as just to draw the circle wide, because there are a number of people standing alone in our community and in our neighborhood, in the neighborhood of this church, in fact. But we'll come back to that tune and back to that theme. Before the service begins, I have a few announcements. The order of service was sent out over UU Info late last night, and I encourage you to see it for the complete list of announcements. Here are some of the highlights. Our church services now are virtual only, so I hope you're able to continue to participate in this way until hopefully the Omicron variant recedes in its transmission. The Saturday brunch continues with a delicious takeout brown bag lunch prepared by volunteers. And last Saturday, we added an outdoor fire pit with the opportunity to roast a hot dog or a sausage. I think we have a slide of that yet. It went over very well. We went through a couple of dozen sausages and hot dogs. And much better to have a hot sausage on a bun than a cold sandwich. They could take the cold sandwich back and have that later in their home. All are welcome to this Saturday brunch. It's not funded from our budget. It's funded from direct contributions from our members and friends. And you can make a donation to that at any time. More on that later in the service. Team meetings coming up this week. We have a meeting of our worship team, which is always held on the second Tuesday of the month. That'll be January the 11th, and I'm the team lead for that. The building team will meet the second Thursday of the month, January 13th at 2 p.m. And the Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation team, normally the first Friday in the month, has moved their meeting to this coming Friday, January the 14th at 3 p.m. Vitska Gradstein is the team lead for that group. Speaking of team meetings, we have a Truth and Reconciliation team and a Climate Crisis team. Each service, they alternate acknowledgments of our responsibility to the original peoples of this land and our responsibility for care of this planet. This morning, I invite Margaret Galbraith to lead our acknowledgement. Margaret, over to you.
Thank you, Norm. Today we are meeting on the unceded ancestral land of Mi'kmaq, of the Mi'kmaq, the land of Mi'kma'ki. Most mornings I step outside for a few minutes to get the feeling of the day. I often think about living out of doors, as the Indigenous people have done for thousands of years. A few of us settlers do it for fun, a few days at a time, in nice weather, preferably. It was quite beautiful yesterday morning with a lot of sunshine, but too cold for me to be in a tent. In the last 150 years or so, Europeans have harnessed the energy of that sun to give ourselves much more comfortable lives out of the weather. Unfortunately and disastrously, by squandering our use of those fossil fuels, we have changed our climate and are ruining the ecosystems for everyone, every living being on the earth. As Unitarian Universalists, we have made a commitment to respect the interdependence of all life on earth. At this time in our history, That commitment leads many of us to do what we can to address the twin crises of climate change and ecosystem destruction. There is a great opportunity to contribute personally to Canada's climate change plan in the next few days, until this Friday. Let me quote more or less from a website called Climate Messengers. Thanks in part to the tireless advocacy of many climate activists, Canada now has the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. It was Bill C-12. As part of the Act, the Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, is legally obligated to establish a plan to achieve Canada's 2030 GHG emissions reduction target. This is a moment of opportunity because the minister must consult the public before he establishes the plan. That's in his instructions from our Prime Minister. And the minister has to publish a report on the consultations, which means he has to actually reply to our submissions. These public consultations are open for a month, but that happens to be December 14th until the 14th of January, which is next Friday. It's very important that regular Canadian citizens who are concerned about climate change participate in these consultations. By adding your voice, you help to press the government to act with sufficient speed and sufficient strength. This is vital. The fossil fuel lobby has large and well-organized groups of individuals who oppose climate change action. They may actually deny the need for it or put pressure on to move too slowly on plans that are too watered down to make the big greenhouse gas reductions that matter. We need the government to know that we understand what needs to be done, that we support them in doing it, that we require them to do it now, and this is our chance to tell them. The website has a whole toolbox of options for how you can participate, from jumping right into their survey or to get into all the background information you might want to read first. Just go to climatemessengers.ca and click on Government Consultations. Our climate needs you to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm just making a note to myself. climatemessengers.ca. Thank you. I hope everyone else is doing the same. And now it's time in the service to light our chalice. I chose a rather unconventional reading for the chalice lighting this morning. I get to read a lot of material and do a lot of research in relation to our themes, and I come across things that I'm delighted by that I want to share one with you this morning. We attend Sunday services for a variety of reasons. I've long maintained that we all share a need for a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. And unlike some other faith traditions, we can't necessarily find that meaning in a faith that we were taught to accept. Instead, we must each decide for ourselves the meaning behind this amazing existence in this amazing universe. This morning's chalice lighting words were penned by Kurt Vonnegut in his 1963 novel, Cat's Cradle. He wrote, "In the beginning, God created the earth, and he looked upon it in his cosmic loneliness. And God said, 'Let us make living creatures out of mud, so the mud can see what we have done.' God created every living creature that now moveth, and one was man. Mud as man alone could speak, and God leaned close to the mud, and man sat up and looked around and spoke. 'What is the purpose of all of this?' man asked politely. 'Everything must have a purpose?' asked God. 'Certainly,' said man. 'Then I leave it to you to think of one for all of this,' said God, and he went away." As we light our chalice, may you make the decision to give meaning to your life. And now, our opening hymn is number 360, Here We Have Gathered. Again, we have a recorded video to share with you. So this morning we're going to be talking about the difference between our intentions and our impacts. Marie-Claude is our Director of Religious Education and leads our programs for children and youth, and she does an amazing job every week trying to find a story to relate to us on the theme. This morning she selected a story that will challenge us to think about the difference between our intentions and our impacts. Over to you, Marie-Claude.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to tell or share the story of a man known later in his life as Mr. Do-Good. Let me tell you why he was given that nickname. Some time ago, this man, an older man, was sitting on a park bench, feeding the pigeons and thinking about his long life and how little good he had done for his friends and neighbors over the years. After much thought, he decided that he was going to do something good for everyone in town, even the animals. He was not rich, so he could not give money away, but he did think of some very unusual ideas. For example, he had been collecting old padlocks for many years and thought of a way to do something good with them. The old man loved children, so he thought of a way to make them happy. Early one morning, before the sun came up, he went to several schools in the neighborhood. He snapped his padlocks on all of the doors of the schools. When the children and teachers arrived, they couldn't get in and school could not begin. Of course, the children were happy. They played games in the schoolyard for over an hour before the repairman could pry open the locks. This was only the beginning. Very early the next morning, with a big sack on his back, Mr. Dogood quietly gathered every morning newspaper from all the apartments and houses in the neighborhood. You see, he believed that the newspaper was just full of bad news and that people would be happier if they didn't read it. These unusual events went on for quite some time. Everyone in town wondered who this Mr. Dogood might be. Some people wanted him arrested. One morning, they got their wish. Mr. Dogood had felt sorry for the dogs that were locked up in their yards. So bright and early, he went around opening gates to all the yards where dogs lived. The dogs were so happy to be free that they followed Mr. Dogood wherever he went, and the police couldn't help but discover who he was. They arrested him and took him before the judge. But when the judge read the charges brought before him, he couldn't make up his mind about what to do with Mr. Dogood. Even though he had done some harmful things, Mr. Dogood thought he was doing helpful things. So what should the judge do? He couldn't put Mr. Dogood in jail for doing helpful things, yet he should be punished for doing the harmful things. It was a very hard decision. Finally, Mr. Dogood said, "Your Honor, why don't you just let me go?" The judge then asked, "And what good would that do?" Mr. Dogood replied, "It would be a good ending for the story." The judge laughed out loud, but would not agree. He left the decision to you and me. What do you think? Should Mr. Dogood go free?
Thank you, Marie-Claude. And now I'm going to ask Colin to come up and assist me as we take this special time to reflect on our joys and sorrows. It is a sacred time in our service. It's a time that we set apart to honor the many joys and the many sorrows that you, the members of the congregation, are living, and to acknowledge our mutual support of our community. I'll ask Colin to light one candle for all of those who are here with us in our thoughts, who are struggling mentally, physically, financially, or emotionally, particularly in this extended time of pandemic. We'll also light one candle for all the joys that are here in the room, the big joys that come along only infrequently, and the little joys that we are blessed with every day, if we are but able to see them. And each week, I invite anyone who would like a candle lit to email me with details. And later, when we stop live streaming on YouTube and before the coffee hour begins, I'll, in addition, invite anyone else to share a joy or a sorrow and have a candle lit if they would like to do so. Many in the congregation will remember Cynthia Davis and, of course, Ralph Davis. They were longtime members of the congregation, and Cynthia died a number of years ago after a tragic fall. Her son, Chris, had battled with cancer for many years, and we learned just this week that he died from the disease. Our thoughts are with Ralph and the family as we light a candle in Chris's memory. Barbara Harsani is in the Fisherman's Hospital in Lunenburg. She's doing well and hoping to be discharged on Monday. And I spoke with her last night. She was bright and as cheerful as you can be from a hospital bed. She asked that we light 3 candles this morning. One, the first, for her husband Rodney, who is still in hospital here in Halifax. I was able to visit him shortly, and with current restrictions, it's not easy to get into the hospital. Barbara asked for a second candle for her granddaughter Erica, who continues to struggle with health issues. And the third candle for Barbara herself, As I say, she'll be discharged from the hospital on Monday. I think they'll have to make arrangements to assist her living at home. It won't be easy for her living in her condominium. And now we have a reflective hymn, again on video, number 6. We would be one.
We would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all our new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which finds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice, strive to make us
May the joys and sorrows, both those acknowledged here this morning and those held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, weave us together in the interdependent fabric that is our beloved community. And now, I invite Margaret, who has a reading for us.
My High Resolve by Howard Thurman. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Despite the dullness and barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I had forgotten. At the time it was full-orbed, glorious and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed so sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, authentic. But little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey. Details, lower-level demands, all kinds of cross-currents. Nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear. If there had been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought it to the end and beyond. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempests, in the days when the darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed.
Thank you, Margaret. In that reading, Howard Thurman is reminding us how the dust and the grit, in his words, of life's journey can take our eyes off the prize, the person we really want to be, that to which our lives are committed. We don't necessarily hear that kind of talk often as Unitarian Universalists. That idea, that to which our lives as Unitarian Universalists are committed. Commitment requires hard work and practice, often doing things that don't come easy. Our theme for the month is intention, and this morning the service revolves around the importance of impact over intention. We often, too often, excuse thoughtless behavior with the pseudo-apology, I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. We all mostly have good intentions, but the follow-through isn't easy. As this prayer by an unknown author reminds us, Dear Lord, so far I've done all right. I haven't gossiped, I haven't lost my temper, I haven't been greedy, grumpy, nasty, selfish, or overindulgent. And I'm really glad about that. But in a few minutes, God, I'm going to get out of bed. And from then on, I'm going to need a lot more help. We have a loving and supportive community here in this congregation. So please don't interpret my remarks this morning as saying anything otherwise. But all situations can be made better. And it's only through conscious mindfulness, and in some cases hard work, that we continue to grow in the direction that we desire and avoid the pitfalls of human nature. This topic of intention versus impact has received a lot of attention among UUs in the context of the self-realization and determined efforts at organizational change within our denomination. These burst forth in the Association of UU Congregations in the United States in 2017. The spark that initiated the changes underway now could be put into the framework of intention versus impact. Many UUs who identified as Black, Indigenous, or people of color were increasingly upset that our association had a seeming inability to deal with racial issues over decades. This boiled over when a white person was appointed to a senior administrative position in a process that was not at all transparent, when there were BIPOC candidates who apparently weren't given due consideration. You can hear those defending their position saying, it was just my intention to quickly fill an important position with the best possible candidate. I had no intention to offend anyone. But in this case, the impact was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. The president of the Association of Congregations in the United States, the president of the Ministers Association, and several other senior staff all resigned shortly after this incident broke. And they struck a committee on institutional change. It was created to recommend a way forward that would deal with historical patterns of systematic racism within our association. What might at first sound like bad news is in fact good news, a recognition of an inherent flaw in our faith tradition and a resolution to correct it. This led, among other things, to the adoption of the eighth principle by the Canadian Unitarian Council, which reads, "We, the associations of congregations, affirm and promote individual and communal action that accountably dismantles racism and systematic barriers to full inclusion in ourselves and in our institutions." The Canadian experience is different in many ways from the American experience, but we are no less a faith tradition dominated by white European culture, perhaps even more so in Canada than in the United States. But we are a faith tradition that claims a universal appeal, that offers insight into the human condition and issues of justice and compassion that transcend nationality and culture. And as such, we are in a moment of learning and exciting growth. It's in the context of the study of these issues that I first heard the word microaggression. Microaggressions are defined as the everyday, subtle, intentional, and oftentimes unintentional interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias towards historically marginalized groups. The difference between microaggressions and overt discrimination, or macroaggressions, is that people who commit microaggressions might not even be aware that they're doing it. Professor Kevin Nadal has spent years researching and writing books on the effects of microaggressions, and I quote him here. As these big structural issues play out, it's important to confront the small stuff. We navigate all of these things in our lives, for many of us on a daily, even hourly basis, and for some of us where we might not even recognize that we're navigating them or even perpetrating them. To be clear, the micro and microaggression doesn't mean that these acts can't have big, life-changing impacts. They can, which is all the more reason to address them when you see them. It's been said that every system is exquisitely tuned to yield exactly the results that it is producing. I want to repeat that. Every system is exquisitely tuned to yield exactly the results that it is producing. Unitarian Universalism, our congregation here in Halifax, is a system producing a faith community that is dominated by white European culture and people raised in that culture. The argument is that minor things that we do with no intention to limit our outreach have the impact of driving away those who would add to our diversity. I chose the picture on the cover of today's order of service, remembering a specific incident that happened when I was attending the UU congregation in Columbus, Georgia. I was responsible for inviting a senior member of the local mosque to speak at the fellowship. He arrived with two other gentlemen, as I recall, and before the service started, I stood talking with them in the sanctuary, greeted them all with a handshake as they arrived, and then we were approached by a woman who was very involved in the congregation, and she extended her hand, anticipating a welcoming handshake. The guest did not extend his hand, but explained that in his tradition, men were not permitted to touch women who were not in their immediate family. The woman took offense and immediately began to explain how this was offensive for her. There's lots that we can unpack here. Two people experiencing a clash of cultures. If you have traveled very much in the world, I've done so in business contexts and realize how easy it is to offend someone without realizing it. The point that I'd like to make here is that one of these people was a guest, made to feel unwelcome, and now unlikely to voluntarily return. Those who have been around UU congregations for a while no doubt have their own stories of the way guests were made to feel unwelcome. The most common example of this, unfortunately, is the way liberal Christians are often treated in our midst, with comments that in some way belittle a sincerely held Christian outlook. It gets more subtle when we think in terms of dealing with BIPOC individuals. When someone says, "I don't see color when I see another person," they're speaking from a position of privilege. For the person that you're speaking to certainly is aware of issues related to their skin color. When you ask someone of color where they're from, when you make assumptions about another person's taste in religious music, when you comment that all lives matter in the context of racial violence, we're manifesting microaggressions that ensure individuals will not feel comfortable and welcome in our congregations. In an article, Intent versus Impact, Why Your Intentions Really Don't Matter, James Ott writes, I cannot tell you how often I've seen people attempt to deflect criticism about their oppressive language or actions by making the conversation one about intent. At what point does the intent conversation stop mattering so that we can step back and look at the impact? After all, in the end, what does our intent, the intent of our action, really matter if our actions have the impact of furthering marginalization or oppression of those around us? When we're dealing with the ways in which our identities intersect with those around us, and in turn the ways our privileges and our experiences of marginalization and oppression intersect, this lesson becomes something larger and more profound. What we need to understand is that making the conversation about intent is inherently a privileged action. How so, you ask? To ensure that you and your identity and intent stay at the center of any conversation and action, while the impact of your actions or words on those around you is marginalized. So if someone ever tells you to check your privilege, what they may very well mean is stop centering your experience and identity in the conversation by making this about the intent of your actions instead of the impact of your actions. That is to say, not everything is about you. Here ends the quote. This reminds me of a word that I don't hear very often. Used to hear a lot. Tact, or tactful. It's a skill that I think used to be highly respected and valued. Not so much now in the age of social media. The word tact comes from a Latin word meaning to touch. To be tactful is to be able to touch someone meaningfully without being offensive. When we're told that the impact of our actions, inactions, or words is hurtful and furthers oppression, we can start by apologizing. Apologizing without any caveats. From there, we can spend time to reflect in hopes of gaining at least some understanding, however marginal, of the harmful impact. And we can do our best to move forward by acting more accountably. This is hard work. Sometimes we might not think of our sanctuary and our place of worship as being a place where we do hard work. But if we're to change old patterns, if we're to see our congregation and our faith tradition grow, it'll take hard work. To set out with intent, we only need to know the goal and our own limitations. How you ask, can I possibly know how someone will interpret my remarks? To be aware of impact, we need to do some study, listen carefully, develop compassion, learn from others, and risk our own self-esteem. Primarily, to anticipate how our words and actions will impact another, we must first care about the other. Develop and stretch our compassion to everyone that we meet. A faith tradition where we give more concern to impact than intention is well worth the effort. May it be so. Amen. This morning we've been talking about the importance of building relationships and bridges across cultural divides, and we have an appropriate interlude now for you. Building Bridges. It's our hymn number 1023.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me?
I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. With all of our voices and all of our visions, with all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you,
I reach out to you, will you reach out to me?
With all of our
voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Hey.
Woo! Air 5.
Lay it out.
Now it's time in our service for our offertory, our offering. It could go without saying, but on the other hand, we all appreciate appropriate reminders. So here is your reminder that the ongoing functions of our congregation require your financial support. The best way to do that is through supporting our annual pledge drive, and this year the congregation has been very supportive. If, however, you're not able to participate in that way, or if you would like to support other activities that are funded outside the pledge drive, here's your choice. Here's your opportunity. Two programs that need funding are the Saturday Brunch and the Minister's Discretionary Fund. During COVID, and as the winter has closed in, I've been pleased to be able to occasionally help members and friends and neighbors with small amounts of money that have made a big difference. That's the role of the Minister's Discretionary Fund. If you'd like to support our work, this slide will help you to do so. Thank you. The closing hymn this morning is a favorite. It's number 311, Let It Be a Dance. I am now 72 years old, and I remember vividly the emotions that I felt, the fear even, the great care required when as a teenager I would ask a girl to dance with me. For me, this hymn speaks to us of the graciousness of careful engagement. May I have this dance with you? No assumptions made there. It speaks of respect for one another. Learn to follow and learn to lead. And it speaks to us of the need for change, learning to bend like a willow. Above all, it speaks of the joy of life if we respect one another and we share this amazing life together.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. May the music say the word and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
Thank you. Watching that video and thinking again about the metaphor of dance, that when you see partners dancing like that, that doesn't happen on the first engagement. So much work that goes into getting to know one another and getting to know your partner. Before I extinguish the chalice here in the sanctuary, these words by Eric Walker Wickstrom. If you are who you were, and if each of us in this congregation is who he or she was, if none of us has changed since the day that we came here, then we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, or mosque, is to help its people to grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other. Whatever that might be for us, however hard that might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. And so may we all. Amen. Thank you all who attended the service today. I'll say goodbye to those who joined by YouTube now as we end our live streaming. For those who joined by Zoom, in a few minutes, we'll return to sharing our joys and sorrows, followed by the virtual coffee hour. Thank you again. The streaming service will now end.